Tom Abinanti is a New York area legislator with a lot on his plate, a lot of important issues, especially in a difficult economy facing the state of New York. But perhaps the cause that's most personal to him is that of advocating for children with special needs. Tom, he has an autistic son, and he's kind enough to join us now. Before we get into some of the challenges, whether it be Albany and going forward, talk about Justin. He's in middle school, right?
Yes, Justin's a beautiful little 12-year-old boy with a great temperament, but unfortunately afflicted with autism. And that has a major impact on our lives. I had a daughter who was a little girl who now is a doctor, and it's a very different life with Justin than it was with my daughter Nicole. We try to do everything with Justin that you would do with a typical child, but it's not always so easy to do that. You bring him into a restaurant, and he'll sit there for a while. You wouldn't even notice that he has autism, except that he's not speaking. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, something might set him off. He might just jump up and run. Or he might start stimming by singing a song out loud, because he doesn't understand the norms that we all adopt in a restaurant. You'll take him to a playground, and he'll be playing with other kids, and then all of a sudden he loses interest and just wanders off or decides to run. He can't be in a regular classroom because he doesn't have conversation. He doesn't have the understanding that the other kids do. We have no way of measuring the intellectual ability of these young kids. We think he's quite bright, but he has no way to tell us that, and you can't test him. And when there's something bothering him, he can't communicate and tell us what the problem is. He's a sweet kid, has a great temperament, but every once in a while he'll have a meltdown. And we don't yet have a way of figuring out what's causing that meltdown, because he can't communicate to us what that problem is. He's speaking a little bit more, more on a needs basis, but no conversation at all, and no ability to say, this is what happened at school today. So it raises all kinds of other issues about how careful we have to be with who his caregivers are. We have to be very careful who the teachers are, who the one-to-one aides are, who the after-school assistants are, and who we leave him with at home if we want to go out for an evening. They have to have skills to be able to deal with him, and we also have to trust them, because he can't say to me, Daddy, somebody did this to me. So it raises all kinds of questions. It's a whole different level of life.
You gave a good description to many of us about what life is like as a snapshot, but talk about some of the challenges and some of the personal expenses that go into it, because so many parents have communicated to say there's no guidebook for you. There's a lot of people that have good intents and they can help, but you run into problems with schools, with HMOs, with reimbursement, and it's trying to navigate your way through what seems to be a forest of red tape, and it shouldn't be as hard as it is.
One of the other parents so often says, if you've seen one child with autism, you've seen one child with autism. And that's a real challenge, because when you talk to other parents, when you talk to experts in the field, everybody has their own tips, their own suggestions, but you're not sure that what will work with your child unless you try it. And parents, as a result of that, wanting to help their child, spend tons of money on all types of techniques. And you always hear about some technique, some kind of therapy that has worked for a particular child. And then there's all the other people who've tried it and basically wasted their money because it doesn't work for their child.
What should be done?
I think the federal government has to declare it as a top priority and put the money into research that needs to be put in. And I just don't see us doing that. I mean, we're seeing there's an argument over whether it's genetic, whether it's caused by environmental causes. Well, you know what? I don't care what your philosophy is or your theory is. Go study all of them. When you have 1 in 54 boys with this problem, you have an epidemic. And down the line, how are you going to deal with 2% of your population that is not part of the mainstream?
What's your biggest worry for your son?
My biggest worry for my son is I'm not going to live long enough to take care of him. Where is he going to go? What is his life going to be when the two of us are not around? Part of my job is to talk to my colleagues and talk about the impacts of what we're doing. In New York right now, we have a significant budget crunch, and we're talking about cutting back on, there was a significant cut in state aid to education. Well, where does the cut fall the hardest? It falls on people with special needs. And so the unintended consequence of trying to tighten things is that school districts will look and say, you know what, we're going to have one less therapist, or one less speech class, or one less OT, occupational therapy, all of which these kids need in varying degrees. So I have to point out to my colleagues, hey guys, consider the impacts here. I understand that, 49 parents want more services, but you can't forget that 50th family that has a child with special needs, and the impact of any kind of delay is going to be horrendous.
Some of the challenge begins with how you define autism, right?
The American Psychiatric Association is going through a big discussion right now about revising their manual, and one of the discussions deals with the definition of autism spectrum disorders. And it's concerning the parents and some of the professionals in the field that the APA seems to be going towards a more restrictive definition of autism spectrum disorders. And if they do that, there could be thousands of people who are presently getting services who will be knocked out. I look at it very simply from the practical point of view. At a minimum, you're going to have chaos, because now all of these people who no longer fit what is the established definition out there, or the accepted definition, are saying, wait a minute, we're getting services, our child needs those services, and what are we going to do? So now you're going to have all of the agencies, you're going to have a lot of the medical personnel, you're going to have the insurance companies, all now trying to figure out chart a new path. So it's very disruptive.
Are you hopeful, or are you worried that we're making strides here for the autistic community?
A little bit of both. I'm hopeful because this country has always been able to come together and meet every challenge that we've had to. And yet at the same time, I don't see the will to do this. So I think it comes down to politics. Everyone who has a family member with a special need has to talk to their elected officials and say, you've got to concentrate on this.